Some girls remember their first love as a warm blur, a song, a scent, a smile caught in sunlight. Mine was sharp, surgical, the kind of love that stitches into your bones before you even know you're bleeding. I was 14 the first time I realized I loved him. He was 17, golden in every way I wasn't, golden skin, golden laugh, golden charm that stretched through the halls of our high school like ivy climbing old brick walls. His name was Caleb, and he was the kind of boy teachers adored, girls whispered about, and I worshipped from the safety of shadows. He lived 2 blocks from me. Our moms were friends. We'd played tag in our shared yards as kids, chased fireflies, eaten popsicles on porches when summers were still endless and uncomplicated. But at some point, the game stopped and he started calling me kiddo with a teasing smile, unaware of how that word gutted me. I would memorize the sound of his footsteps when he came over, the angle of his jaw as he laughed with my older brother, the casual toss of his backpack like the world owed him space. He barely noticed me in high school. Not really. He'd ruffle my hair or throw a wink my way during family barbecues, but I was just the little girl next door. Quiet. Bookish. Always watching, never touched. I used to write his name in the margins of my notebooks. I'd doodle little daydreams where he'd walk me home, hold my hand, tell me he saw me, even when I felt invisible. And then, he did. It was the last semester of his senior year. I was 16, braces freshly removed, still awkward but softening into my skin. He'd broken up with his cheerleader girlfriend 2 weeks earlier. I remember because her tears were loud in the hallway, and the rumor mill turned every locker into a radio. He showed up on my porch one night. My brother wasn't home. My parents were out. I was reading in the living room, a storm tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. "You got any snacks?" He grinned, soaked through, hair sticking to his forehead. "Power's out at my place." I let him in. My heart was a cage of wings. We sat in the kitchen, sharing chips, the glow of the candle flickering between us. He asked about my classes, my favorite music, if I still wanted to study medicine. I don't remember what I said. I only remember how he looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. "You grew up," he murmured. My breath caught. "You make it sound like a crime." He chuckled. "It kinda is. I still think of you as that kid who cried when your popsicle melted." I blushed. "Maybe I still do." He tilted his head. "Nah, you're different now." Something in his eyes changed. Slowed. His smile softened. And then, without warning, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. It was gentle. Hesitant. His lips tasted like salt and storm. I forgot how to breathe. But then, he pulled back, blinked like he'd just come out of a trance, and whispered, "Shit." I stared at him. "What?" "That was a mistake," he said. I didn't mean to." He stood up fast. Ran a hand through his hair. "Don't tell your brother, okay? This didn't happen." And just like that, he was gone. No goodbye. No explanation. The next day, he didn't text. Didn't call. At school, he avoided me like I was contagious. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. That I'd imagined the heat in his touch, the softness in his voice. That maybe I was just a kid again. But then I found the note in my locker. "You're sweet. But I don't want to hurt you. Forget that night." I crumpled it in my fist, tears stinging like acid. But I couldn't forget. Not when he still walked the same halls. Not when his scent still lingered in my hoodie from that night. Not when every part of me ached to matter to him again. I should have hated him. I should have let him go. But I didn't. I loved him quietly. Stupidly. Through every girlfriend he had. Through graduation. Through college applications. I clung to that one kiss like it was a prophecy. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he'd come back. Maybe he just needed time. Maybe I was enough, eventually. The heart is a strange thing. It knows how to lie to itself with poetry. And I let it. Because the alternative was facing the truth. That he never wanted me the way I wanted him. That I was a flicker. And he was the fire I kept burning for, long after he'd gone cold. But I still believed. And that belief would become the first brick in a wall I would spend years trying to break down. One kiss. One lie. And a lifetime of waiting for a boy who would never choose me unless he needed something. I just didn't know what yet. But I would. Soon. And it would break me in a way that no kiss ever could. I should have seen it coming. The second time Caleb entered my life, he didn't knock. He never knocked. He just walked back in, like time hadn't passed and my heart hadn't been quietly bleeding for years. We were both in university now, different campuses, same city. I was studying biology like I'd always planned, chasing something steady, something that might make me feel like I had control over anything. He was majoring in business, already glowing with that effortless charm that turned professors into cheerleaders and classmates into shadows. We ran into each other at a campus bookstore. I was holding a biochem textbook. He was laughing about the price of bottled water. When our eyes met, everything in my body stilled. Like some part of me thought he might not remember. But he did. Of course he did. Kiddo, he said, that same teasing lilt in his voice. You always show up when I least expect it. I tried to smile, but it trembled. I'm not a kid anymore. His gaze lingered. Slowed. Yeah, I can see that. We started meeting for coffee. Study breaks. Lunches that bled into dinners. At first, I told myself it was just old familiarity. A slow drift back to something safe. But the truth was uglier. I still loved him. Despite everything. Despite the note. Despite the silence. And this time, he was different. Softer. More present. He remembered how I took my coffee. He texted first. He asked questions and waited for answers. It felt like he was trying. Like maybe he'd grown into someone who knew what to do with love. When he asked me out officially, it wasn't fireworks. It was quiet. A slow Sunday afternoon in a park, our fingers grazing over a shared bag of chips. I think we should try this, he said. My heart thudded. Try what? Us. You and me. I said yes before I could second guess it. Before I could remember how badly it hurt the last time. The first few months were everything I'd imagined. Movie dates. Holding hands at campus parties. Waking up to sleepy good morning texts. He introduced me to his friends. Kissed me in public. Called me my girl. I floated through it like a dream I was afraid to wake from. Until the doctor's appointment. It wasn't serious. A routine checkup. A few irregular cycles. Some hormone tests. A vague suggestion to keep an eye on it. But then a second appointment. Then a third. Then a soft-spoken specialist with kind eyes telling me I might have premature ovarian failure. The words echoed like glass breaking in a cathedral. It doesn't mean you'll never have children, the doctor said gently. But it will be harder. Maybe not possible without help. I left the office numb, the pamphlet crumpled in my hand. I didn't cry until I got home, knees hitting the cold tiles of my bathroom floor. I didn't want to tell him. But I did. I couldn't keep something that big from him. We were lying in bed, his dorm, the lights low, my head on his chest. I told him everything, my voice cracking halfway through, bracing myself for silence. He didn't say anything right away. Just stared at the ceiling like it had answers. Then he exhaled, slow and heavy. That's a lot. I know, I whispered. He sat up, rubbing his temples. So what does that mean? You can't, ever. I don't know, I said. It might be possible. With help. But there's a chance. That you're infertile, he finished. The word landed like a slap. He got up. Paced. Said nothing for 5 whole minutes. Then, I always pictured having a big family. I know. More silence. I don't know if I can do this, he said finally, eyes still on the floor. I'm sorry. I don't think I can give up that dream. Something inside me snapped. Quietly. I nodded, numb. Okay. And just like that, he walked out again. No fight. No holding me. No asking what I needed. Just a clean exit from something messy. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. I just stopped eating for a few days. Slept too much. Avoided mirrors. Avoided hope. I went through the motions, showed up for class, turned in assignments, smiled when necessary. But inside, I was shrinking. It wasn't the diagnosis that broke me. It was the way he made it about him. As if I'd failed him. As if my body had betrayed him, not me. As if love was conditional on what I could give, not who I was. 6 months later, I saw the engagement photos. Him. With her. A girl with a laugh like champagne and a uterus that probably worked just fine. They looked happy. Radiant. He'd only been gone for 6 months. She wore the ring I used to daydream about. And he looked like he'd never known a different version of love. I sat on my bathroom floor again that night, just like before. But this time, I didn't cry. I just stared at my reflection, eyes hollow, and whispered, so that's all I was? A detour. A placeholder. A body he wanted to love until it proved inconvenient. And yet, some cruel part of me still loved him. Still wanted to believe that maybe, he'd regret it one day. But what good was regret when it always came too late? What good was a memory if it only reminded you of what you weren't? I closed my eyes, curled into myself, and made a silent vow. Not to get revenge. Not to prove anything. Just to survive. Even if it meant doing it alone. Because that was the only thing I could count on anymore. The engagement photos should have been the final blow, but somehow, life had one more twist in store for me. I didn't find out about the wedding through social media or whispered gossip. I found out in person. It was the first week of spring semester. Campus was blooming with cherry blossoms and the air smelled like possibility. I was in the library, half asleep over a stack of biochem notes, when I heard the laugh. His laugh. My spine stiffened before my mind caught up. I looked up, and there he was. Caleb. Arm in arm with her. His fiancée. She was even more beautiful in person, golden hair, a smile so wide it didn't seem like it had ever known disappointment. Her laugh rang through the space like a bell. His hand rested on the small of her back like it had found its rightful place. He didn't see me at first. I tried to look away. Tried to breathe. But my body betrayed me. I froze, too late to run, too visible to hide. His gaze caught mine. A pause. A flicker. I braced for him to ignore me. But instead, he smiled. Not cruelly. Not kindly. Just, neutrally. Like I was a memory that no longer stung. He said, "Hey you." I blinked. "Hey. This is Marissa," he said, gesturing to the woman on his arm. "My fiancée." "Of course." "Congrats," I managed, hoping my voice didn't shake. Marissa smiled, oblivious. "Thank you." He's been planning the honeymoon like it's a second job. Caleb laughed. "Gotta get it right." Then he turned back to me, eyes narrowing just slightly. "How've you been?" I swallowed. "Busy. School, work, life." "You look good," he said, too casually. "Really good." Marissa was flipping through a magazine. She didn't hear it. But I did. I heard every syllable like it was a test. "Thanks," I said flatly. He glanced at my books. "Still going pre-med?" "For now." "That's amazing." He didn't ask if I was seeing anyone. He didn't apologize. He didn't bring up the way he'd left me like an afterthought, or the way my diagnosis had been the guillotine for his affection. He just smiled and said, "I hope you're healing." And then he walked away. Just like that. Like I was a detour he barely remembered taking. I stared down at my notes, but the words swam. That night, I threw up in my dorm bathroom. Not because of him. Not entirely. But because some part of me had clung to the idea that he'd at least feel something. But he didn't. He had moved on. And I was still here, holding pieces of a story that had already ended. 4 weeks after, I spiraled. Quietly. I started sleeping through alarms. Missing lectures. Skipping meals. Therapy didn't help much, at first. I sat through the sessions, nodding at the right times, saying all the textbook phrases, "I know my worth. He doesn't define me. I deserve love." But they tasted hollow. Because the truth was uglier. I didn't believe them. I had defined myself by him. I had waited for his love to make me feel whole. And now that it never came, I didn't know who I was without it. One night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and wrote one line. I loved someone who never chose me. Then I stared at it for hours. That sentence lived with me, slept beside me, whispered through my days. I tried dating again. A classmate named Jared. Sweet, smart, patient. But I couldn't feel anything. He touched my hand and I flinched. He asked me what I wanted, and I didn't know how to answer. Because all I'd ever wanted had already been taken, willingly given to someone else. Caleb and Marissa got married that summer. I didn't look at the photos. But I heard. She wore lace. He cried at the altar. They danced under fairy lights. Her dress sparkled. And me? I spent the night in bed with a heating pad and a migraine, trying to convince myself that someday, I'd feel happy for him. That day didn't come. But something else did. A shift. Small. But real. It started when I deleted the folder of pictures I still had. Then his number. Then the drafts of texts I used to write and never send. I stopped checking his social media. Stopped comparing. I began walking more. Taking photos of strangers in the park. Starting a blog. People liked my eye, said I saw the world in a way that made it softer. I wasn't sure about that. But I knew this. For the first time in years, I was beginning to see myself. Not through his gaze. Not through anyone's. Just mine. And that scared me. Because it meant letting go of the one story I'd clung to for so long. But it also thrilled me. Because maybe, just maybe, I had another story waiting to be told. One where I didn't wait to be chosen. One where I chose myself. Grief doesn't always look like sobbing on the floor. Sometimes it looks like waking up one day and realizing you haven't thought about him in 3 hours, and then hating yourself for being proud of that. That was the version of healing I lived with. Small wins. Quiet rebellions against the part of me that still thought love was something I had to beg for. I stopped counting the months since his wedding and started counting the days I didn't flinch when someone said his name. But that didn't mean he was gone. No, Caleb still lived in the corners of my life, in the playlist I couldn't bring myself to delete, in the bar down the street I avoided because I once saw him there with her, laughing like heartbreak didn't exist. He was in the way I hesitated before answering questions about my past, in the subtle ache that returned every time someone said, "You'd make such a good mom someday," without knowing what that meant for me. I stopped posting online. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want to offer anyone a version of me that still wasn't real. I buried myself in my classes, in late-night shifts at the tutoring center, in photography walks where I'd take hundreds of photos and keep maybe 3. I started documenting strangers, moments that had nothing to do with me. A mother tying her child's shoelace in the rain. An old man feeding pigeons with the kind of patience that hurt to watch. 2 students holding hands under a flickering street lamp like the world would split if they let go. Somewhere in all of that, I began to see something. Not just beauty, but survival. People loving and losing and continuing anyway. And I realized, I wanted to be like that. Not empty. Not bitter. Just continuing. My photography professor noticed my shift. He pulled me aside after class one day, pointing to one of my prints. A shot of a woman sitting alone on a train, her reflection in the window blurring with the lights of the city. "You see loneliness," he said, "but you frame it with so much gentleness. That's rare." I swallowed. "I think I'm just trying to understand it." He nodded. "Then keep going. You're closer than you think." He recommended I submit my portfolio to a local gallery. I laughed it off at first, me, a girl still learning how to breathe without apology, but eventually I did. I expected a polite rejection. What I got instead was an invitation to showcase 5 pieces in a group exhibition. It was the first thing in years that had nothing to do with Caleb. No shadow. No tie. Just me. But as life so often does, the moment I started to stand on my own, he came back. Not in person. Not yet. In a photo. Marissa had posted it, her profile public, as always. But this one was different. It wasn't a vacation selfie or a birthday dinner. It was a hospital room. A bouquet of white lilies on a table. A child's toy in the corner. Her caption was brief. "Holding on. Please keep us in your prayers." I stared at it for a long time. Then scrolled. No new posts for 2 weeks. And then, a black and white photo. Candles. A framed picture. A name. Her name. Marissa Carter. Dead at 27. Suddenly, silence filled everything. I didn't know how she died. The comments speculated: car accident, complication, cancer. I didn't dig. I couldn't. But I felt it. That pull. That whisper in my ribs. You know what's coming. And I did. Because grief doesn't just knock. It waits until the moment you think you're free. Then it taps on the door like an old friend with unfinished business. And when Caleb finally messaged me, 2 weeks later, it wasn't a plea or an apology. It was just 4 words. Can we talk soon? My hands shook when I read it. I didn't answer right away. But I didn't delete it either. I hated myself for even considering it. But curiosity has a cruel way of sounding like closure. So I sat there, staring at my phone, my breath caught between past and present, wondering if the girl who loved him would pick it up again. And if the woman I'd become would survive it. I didn't respond to his message for 3 days. I let it rot at the top of my screen, hovering there like a dare. Every time I picked up my phone, it stared back at me. Can we talk soon? 4 words, simple enough to look harmless, but laced with every scar I'd spent years suturing shut. The part of me that still ached, that still remembered what it felt like to be touched and then discarded, wanted to ignore him. But the other part, the quieter, more dangerous part, wanted to know why. Why now? Why me? Why, after all this time, did he think he still had access to my life like it was some backroom he left his coat in? I finally wrote back, I don't think that's a good idea. He replied within 10 minutes. Please. Just one conversation. In person. It was late. I was in bed with my laptop propped on my knees, editing a photo of a woman sitting at a bus stop with mascara streaks on her cheeks. There was something about her expression, stillness in the chaos, that made me pause. It looked like me. Not now, maybe. But once. I typed back before I could stop myself. Tomorrow. 5 p.m. The park near campus. And just like that, I'd cracked open a door I had once boarded shut. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, memories flooded in. The night he kissed me in the rain. The way his hands trembled when he said he couldn't give up his dream of being a father. The hospital post. The caption. The candles. The woman he left me for was dead. And I didn't know how to feel about that. The next day was grey, not rainy but heavy, like the sky was holding something in. I wore black, not because I was mourning, but because it made me feel invisible, armored. I got there early. Sat on our old bench. The one we used to eat fries on after school. The one where he once told me he liked the way I said his name. He arrived 10 minutes late, looking like the ghost of himself. The charm was still there, but it was dulled, frayed at the edges. He wore a dark sweater and jeans that hung looser than they used to. His eyes, always so clear and unreadable, were red-rimmed and tired. Hey, he said softly. I nodded. Hi. He sat beside me, close enough to make the air tighten but not close enough to touch. Thanks for meeting me. I almost didn't. I know. He paused, took a breath. I don't know how to start. Then don't, I said. Just tell me what you want. He blinked, clearly not expecting that. He rubbed the back of his neck. Marissa's gone. I know. It was sudden. A brain aneurysm. 1 second she was talking, the next, his voice cracked. I said nothing. Not because I didn't feel for him. I did. But I had no words for a man who once left me without any. She left behind everything, he continued. Our home. Her art. Our son. I turned then, slowly. You have a son. He nodded, eyes bright with something between pride and sorrow. Oliver. He just turned 2. 2. That meant she was pregnant when they got married. Of course she was. He's everything, he said, voice breaking. But I'm falling apart. I don't know what I'm doing. Every day I wake up terrified I'll fail him. I'm sorry you're going through that, I said quietly. He looked at me, a long, aching stare. I thought about you a lot these past few weeks. I stiffened. Why? Because when everything fell apart, I realized the person I always felt safest with was you. I closed my eyes, pain flaring in places I thought had gone numb. I don't want your grief, I whispered. I'm not here to fix what she left behind. I'm not asking you to, he said quickly. I miss you. I miss us. There was no us, Caleb, I said, sharper than I meant to. There was you needing things and me giving them until there was nothing left. He flinched. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. He looked down. I know. For a long moment, we just sat there, breathing in the weight of everything unspoken. Then he said, will you come meet Oliver? The question stunned me. What? He asks for her. All the time. He's too young to understand. But he knows something's missing. And you want to fill that space with me? No, he said quickly. I mean, yes. But not like that. I just thought, maybe it would help. For both of us. I stood up then. The bench creaked under the shift. I'm not a bandage, Caleb. He stood too. I know you're not. But I thought maybe, if we spent time together again. I stared at him, at this man who had once walked away from me like I was defective, now asking me to step into the ruins of his second life and pretend it hadn't shattered me first. I'll think about it, I said. He looked relieved. Thank you. I left without saying goodbye. My heart was a storm by the time I got home. But under all that lightning, I felt something else blooming. Not hope, but power. For the first time in years, I held the choice. And I wasn't sure what scared me more. The possibility of forgiving him. Or the possibility that I wouldn't want to. He proposed on a Tuesday. Not with roses or candles or a trembling voice. Not with awe or sincerity or even love. It was after a long day. I'd stopped by to drop off a book Oliver had left in my car. I found them in the living room, Oliver asleep on Caleb's chest, his little hand curled into his father's hoodie. Caleb's head was tilted back, eyes closed, exhaustion carved deep into his features. I stood in the doorway longer than I meant to, heart tight, mind split in half. One side whispering, this is the life you always wanted. The other answering, but not like this. He opened his eyes and smiled softly. He really likes you. I like him too, I said, kneeling to take the book out of my bag. He shifted, cradling Oliver as he stood and carried him to bed. I waited in the kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee, pretending my hands weren't shaking. When he came back, the air felt different. Thicker. Charged. I've been thinking, he said, leaning against the counter. I looked up. About what? About us. About him. About how much sense this all makes. I set the mug down. Slowly. What do you mean? He stepped closer, not touching me but invading space anyway. You're already here. You already love him. You know me better than anyone. What if we just made this official? I stared. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm saying it makes sense, he said. For Oliver. For us. No ring. No kneeling. Just logic, clean and cold. And somehow, that hurt more than all the other betrayals combined. You're proposing a business transaction, I said, stunned. He frowned. No. I'm proposing a life together. With someone I trust. Someone who understands me. No, I whispered. You're proposing a safety net. Not a marriage. He stepped back, arms crossing. You're overthinking this. No. I'm finally thinking, Caleb. Silence. Then quieter, almost a plea. I know I screwed up before. I know I walked away when I shouldn't have. But you're still here. Doesn't that mean something? And God help me, it did. But not enough. I left without saying yes. Or no. Just left. The next few days were hell. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts, calls, a voice memo of Oliver babbling something that almost sounded like my name. And yet, every time I looked at the screen, I felt a wave of something I couldn't name. Grief, rage, fear, and guilt. Because the cruel truth was, part of me wanted to say yes. Not out of love. But because I was tired. Tired of being alone. Tired of wondering if anyone would ever choose me without needing a reason. Tired of being strong. And yet, something didn't sit right. I started noticing things. Subtle. Quiet. But familiar. The way Caleb praised me only in relation to what I could do for Oliver. The way he touched my hand in public but never looked me in the eye when we were alone. The way he said we when it was convenient, and you when things were hard. He hadn't changed. He'd just rebranded. He still saw me as a solution, not a person. And I was so used to loving him that I almost accepted it again. Almost. But then came the final straw. We were at the park. Oliver was running in circles, his laughter the only pure thing in the world. Caleb stood beside me, talking to another parent. "This is Elle," he said. "We're figuring things out." The woman smiled. "Oh, so you're back together?" And Caleb said, "Yeah, basically." I turned so slowly it felt like a dream. "Excuse me?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "You just told her we're back together." His face twisted into that familiar condescending smile. "It's not a big deal. I mean, we kind of are, right?" "No, Caleb. We're not. You never even asked me." "You're being dramatic," he muttered. And there it was. The same voice. The same dismissal. I walked away without another word. Drove home in silence. Cried in the shower for 45 minutes. Then stared at my reflection and whispered no more. Because it wasn't just that he didn't love me. It was that he never saw me. And I was done shrinking just to be in his line of sight. I didn't answer his messages after the park. Not one. Not the "can we talk?" or the "I didn't mean it like that," or even the one that just said please. I watched them pile up like debris on a shore I no longer lived near. There was a time when even a single text from him would have unraveled me, made my hands tremble, made me rearrange my entire day just to decode what he meant by a period versus an exclamation point. But now I just let them sit there. Unopened. Unanswered. Power in silence. Something I never knew I had. He came to my apartment 2 days later. I didn't buzz him in. He waited outside for 45 minutes. I know because I watched from behind my curtain. Not out of longing. Out of mourning, for the girl who would have run down the stairs barefoot just to hear him say her name. But I wasn't her anymore. I waited until he finally left, his shoulders slumped, fingers typing something furious into his phone as he walked away. That night, I went through my photo archives. Not of him, those were long deleted, but of me. The real me. The one who'd been forming quietly while I was too distracted by heartbreak to notice. I found a picture of myself on a bridge in Prague from the photo residency I'd done months earlier. My smile was small, but real. My eyes clear. No shadow of Caleb in them. I printed it. Framed it. Put it by my bed. The next day, I blocked his number. I expected relief. What I got instead was rage, from him. It started with emails. Long winding monologues about how I was abandoning Oliver, how after everything, I could at least be kind. Then he posted a vague status online. It's always the ones you think you can count on. Mutual friends reached out, asking what happened. I ignored them. But he kept going. I ran into his sister at the grocery store. She cornered me between the cereal aisle and the self-checkout machines. "You really hurt him, you know," she said, eyes narrowed. "After everything with Marissa, he needed someone." "He needed a therapist," I said calmly. "Not a backup wife." She gasped like I'd slapped her, but I didn't flinch. I was done playing the quiet girl who absorbed everyone else's damage. Back home, I sat on my balcony and wrote a letter. Not to send. Just to purge. "Dear Caleb, you didn't break me. You bent me until I thought my own shape was unnatural, until I believed that loving you quietly was more noble than asking to be seen. You made me think survival was enough. But I want more. I deserve more. You didn't choose me when it mattered. You only came back when she was gone. And even then, you didn't come back for love, you came back for convenience. For comfort. For parenting help. I am not your penance. I am not your unfinished sentence. This is me, choosing myself. For the first time. Goodbye." I folded the letter. Burned it in my sink. Watched the ashes swirl down the drain like the last remnants of a story that never deserved a happy ending. 2 weeks passed. No word. Then I got the envelope. Not from him. From a lawyer. It was about custody. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the paper. He had listed me as a potential guardian in the event that something happened to him. I stared at it, nausea curling in my gut. This wasn't romance. This wasn't reconciliation. This was possession. He wanted me tethered. Legally. Emotionally. Permanently. He was still trying to own me without asking me to belong. And this time, I didn't hesitate. I called the lawyer. Declined. Firmly. Then called Caleb's number, just once, from a friend's phone. He answered on the second ring. "L." His voice cracked. "I'm not yours," I said. "And I never was. Take my name off that paperwork. And don't contact me again." "Wait, please." I hung up, blocked the number again. And this time, the silence felt like freedom. But it wasn't the end. Because healing is never a straight line. And heartbreak has a way of echoing even when the walls are gone. But now, for the first time, I could hear my own voice through it. And I liked how it sounded. The hardest part wasn't walking away from him. It was living in the space that followed. The quiet. The sudden, startling absence of someone I'd once allowed to fill every corner of my identity. I thought leaving Caleb would feel like tearing a limb off, but it didn't. It felt like pulling out a shard that had been lodged in my skin for years. Painful, yes, but also clean. I bled, but I didn't break. And that alone felt like a miracle. In the weeks after I cut ties for good, I expected grief to come storming in. Instead, it tiptoed, testing the door. I let it in, carefully. Gave it space. Gave myself permission to mourn what I thought we could have been. Not what we were, because that was never real, but the fantasy I'd kept alive like a flame in my chest. I threw myself into work. Photography gigs started stacking up, small ones at first, weddings, portraits, street shots for local articles. But something shifted in the way I saw the world. My lens began to crave vulnerability, not perfection. My best photos weren't of posed smiles, they were of mothers adjusting tiny shoes, of lovers arguing softly in the corner of a cafe, of a woman wiping her lipstick off in a bathroom mirror, like she just realized the date wasn't worth the effort. People started noticing. I was offered a spot in an international project, 10 photographers capturing womanhood around the world. I almost declined out of fear, but something inside me, a new voice quieter but steadier than the one Caleb had built his power on, whispered, "Say yes." So I did. 3 months. 8 countries. Endless faces, endless stories. And in the process, I found something I didn't even know I was missing myself. Not the version that waited on texts or cried into the silence or tried to earn love by being small. But the woman who belonged to no one. Who took up space and liked it. In Morocco, I watched 2 sisters peel pomegranates while talking about men who never showed up when it counted. They laughed in a way that made the sadness irrelevant. In Tokyo, I photographed a woman in her 60s who told me she left her husband after 40 years and had never been more in love with herself. And in Italy, I met someone. His name was Luca. He wasn't loud. Or overwhelming. He didn't come with a tragic past or a bleeding heart that demanded saving. He was soft, curious, full of quiet questions that made me feel seen without being dissected. He asked me what my favorite childhood memory was. Not what my trauma was. Not what I could offer. He touched my hand without expectation. He listened. And something inside me unraveled, not with fear but relief. One night, we sat on a rooftop overlooking the city, the lights glinting like secrets. He looked at me and said, "You have this way of making silence feel safe." I smiled. "That's new." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" I used to think I had to fill silence with something. Prove I was worth staying for. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You don't have to prove anything." I didn't fall in love with him. Not yet. But I saw the outline of what love could be, if it was built on truth, not convenience. When I returned home, everything looked different. Smaller, maybe. But not in a bad way. In a manageable way. In a real way. My name was suddenly on shortlists, in articles, tagged in photos I didn't take. People wanted interviews. A publisher reached out about a book. And Caleb? He was still silent. Not out of choice. Out of loss. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he'd moved. Quit his job. was staying with his parents for a while. Oliver was being cared for by Marissa's sister while he got his head straight. I felt sorry for Oliver, not for Caleb, because now I understood something he never could. Love isn't about needing someone. It's about choosing them. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And Caleb had never chosen me. He only noticed me when something was missing. But Luca saw me as I was. Whole. Even with all my cracks. And that was the difference. That was everything. I saw him again by accident. It was fall, cool enough for scarves and coffee that actually warmed your hands instead of just giving you something to do with them. I just finished setting up my exhibit at the gallery downtown, a collection called Soft Armor. It was all portraits of women I'd met during my travels, laughing, crying, healing, breaking, rebuilding. Pieces of me in every frame, though no one would have known unless they looked close. I was standing outside, sipping a chai and texting Luca when I felt it, that shift in the air. Like a shadow you don't see but feel, crawling along your spine. I turned. And there he was. Caleb. Older. Thinner. He looked like he hadn't slept well in months. His hair was longer, messy in that way that wasn't styled to look effortless, but actually was the result of not caring. He wore a dark coat, hands stuffed in the pockets, shoulders curled in like someone who was trying not to take up space anymore. He froze when he saw me. For a second, I thought he might turn around. But he didn't. He walked over slowly, like he was approaching something sacred or dangerous, or both. Hey, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I took a long sip of my drink before answering. Hi. He looked at the building behind me, at the posters in the window. My name, printed in bold beneath the exhibit title. This yours? He asked. It is. A pause. It's beautiful, he said, though he hadn't seen it. Just like he'd said I was beautiful years ago, before he left. The same tone. The same emptiness. I didn't respond. He shifted. I've been meaning to reach out. But you didn't. I figured you wouldn't want to hear from me. You figured right. Another pause. The weight of everything unsaid, everything too late, settled between us. How's Oliver? I asked, because part of me still cared. Would always care. About the boy. Never again about the man. He's good. Getting big. He misses you. I swallowed hard, jaw tight. He should be missing his mother. He looked down, nodding. He does. Every day. I'm sorry for him, I said. And I meant it. But I didn't offer anything more. He looked up then, and the rawness in his eyes startled me. I think about you all the time. That's not my problem anymore. He flinched. I know. I came here today hoping to see you. I didn't know if I would. But I hoped. Why? Because I wanted to tell you something. I waited. He cleared his throat, the words catching. You were never ordinary. You were never less. I was just too weak to understand what I had when it mattered. I held his gaze, and for the first time, I didn't feel that old pull. That ache. That dangerous flicker of maybe. There was only stillness. And clarity. You didn't just lose me, I said. You threw me away. And I don't say that to hurt you. I say it because it's the truth you never let yourself hear. He blinked fast, like the words cut deeper than he expected. And now? He asked. Is it really over? I smiled. Softly. Not cruel. Just sure. It was over the second I realized I deserved better than being someone's second option. The wind picked up. My hair blew across my face. I didn't bother fixing it. You know, he said after a moment, you look happy. I am. He nodded. Is there someone else? I didn't answer. He chuckled, bitter. Of course there is. I turned to leave. Goodbye, Caleb. He called after me. I stopped. He didn't say anything for a long time. Just stood there, eyes burning. Then finally he whispered, do you ever think we could have worked out? If things had gone differently? I didn't turn around. I used to, I said. But I don't anymore. I walked inside. And I didn't look back. because he didn't deserve to see how light I felt. How free. How completely I had unlearned him. Inside the gallery, people were already filtering in, standing before the photos with quiet reverence. Luca was there, waiting, holding a program in his hands, smiling like I was the only thing that made sense in the world. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just held out his hand. And I took it. Because that was the difference between them. Caleb always asked me to prove I was worthy of his love. Luca just loved me. No strings. No timelines. No conditions. And I was done loving in silence. I was done being chosen last. This time, I chose me first. Sometimes I wonder if the girl I used to be would recognize the woman I've become. If she'd believe that one day, she'd stand in a sunlit gallery full of strangers who see her, not for what she lost, but for what she found in herself. I think she'd be proud. I hope so. The exhibit ended weeks ago. Most of the photos were sold. A publisher signed me to turn the collection into a book, and I signed the papers without shaking. That, more than anything, felt like closure, signing my name to something that was entirely, unapologetically mine. Caleb never reached out again. Not after that day outside the gallery. Not after I told him I was done. He disappeared into the blur of what I used to want, faded like an echo that doesn't belong to the room anymore. And Oliver? I still think about him. I still hope he's laughing somewhere, playing with his dinosaurs, feeling safe in a world that gave him too much too soon. But I don't reach out. I can't. Because love isn't just about showing up, it's about knowing when not to. Luca and I still take it slow. He doesn't ask me to be more than I am, and I don't pretend to be less. We go on long walks. He reads me poems. He brings me silence and never fills it with expectation. With him, I don't feel like a question. I feel like an answer that never needed justifying. There are still days I wake up aching. For what I endured. For who I used to be. But the ache isn't sharp anymore. It's soft, like a scar I trace when I need to remember how far I've come. Sometimes healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in the quiet, the steady, the choice to keep going. And I do. Every day, I wake up and choose peace. Not because I never knew chaos, but because I finally learned I wasn't born to live inside it. So here I am. Not the girl he left behind. Not the woman he tried to come back to. But something entirely new. Something he'll never get to know. And that, more than anything, is the ending I never thought I'd get. One where I don't need him to regret me. Because I no longer regret me. And that's the most beautiful thing of all.